Christine, thank you so much for being, willing to come and chat to me about what I'm sort of calling a transformation and that has happened for you in your life, sort of in the last 5 years, I suppose, but maybe it started a bit longer, a bit before that. So,
hmm
um, just today, right now, sitting here, tell me exactly where you are in the world and what's going on for you.
Right, so I'm sat here in Cornwall, and what's going on? It's a lovely Friday morning, and yeah, it's just a real pleasure to be talking with you.
It's a real pleasure to be talking to you. So basically, Christine, I know I've known you a very, very long time, and I'm really pleased that you're willing to talk to me because I know sometimes we sort of are sort of ships in the night, and we used to walk at 6:30 every morning, come hail, rain, or shine.
We did.
So thank you for spending some time with me because I know that you have a very busy life at the moment. And I'm just really interested in your sort of transition from that busy corporate life working in a tech company to actually deciding to move, your whole life, change it round, to live in Cornwall.
hmm
So tell me a little bit about, that transition or that what led up to that transition for you.
Okay, well, I think it probably started with the pandemic, to be honest, because I think the pandemic was such a game changer for everyone. You know, the world had to completely stop what they were doing and think about what did the new world look like. And for me at the time, I was working remotely in a corporate organization, and that meant a lot of time online. But also, what I would find is because I was working in a global organization, you didn't really have much of a voice at that time. So when the pandemic hit and everybody was working for home, it was a real game changer and a leveler, I would say. So all of a sudden, instead of being the only person who was dialing in and being ignored because I wasn't in the room,
Right.
everybody was at home. So, and I think that sort of shifted my view on where I needed to be then to be working because I was no longer restricted from a geography perspective
Right.
to being where I'd always been.
And that's sort of like the geography, but also,
Mm.
you know, everybody, as you said, is dialing in, and that's not what you were used to. You were used to seeing people face to face. So
Yes.
how did that dialing in and then being one of, a number of people who are being ignored, as you said, what was that like for you?
Well, I think the first thing that I noticed, first of all, it was like all of a sudden you felt equal. You know, everybody was having to dial in. So I had probably had a head start because I was already used to doing that, whereas the others were having to adjust to this new pattern of working. But for me, it was already a pattern that I'd established.
Okay.
So that gave me more confidence, I would say, and more of a voice in the meetings that I was in. But then the second thing that was very obvious was that all of a sudden everyone in your office was in your front room, wherever you happened to be for your calls. So you couldn't hide the fact that the dog was barking or, but that was true for everyone.
Yeah.
So, and I think in a way that almost like that professional veneer that we all like to put on when we, feel we're in a work environment slipped for me and for everybody else. And it was okay that, people were maybe sitting there and only half dressed or because they only had the top halves showing when they were on camera. So
Or
yeah, it was very, very interesting.
that cat walking across the street.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So if you think back to that time when, you were suddenly your world was changed, the same
Mm.
as so many other people, what was the moment that meant the die was cast for you when you just knew you needed to make a change? What was that moment or that, I don't know whether it was a moment or whether or not it was a slow transition. What was it that happened that caused you to think, I have to make a change or the die was cast?
I think that first of all, I was getting a lot of not reinforcement from my husband around the fact that he wanted to move somewhere. So he definitely loves adventure, loves variety, and he wanted to move.
Right.
And that coupled with my own desire to almost like to really move in the direction of my dreams. And my dreams had always been to be living somewhere that was near the sea, and but when I say dream, like a way off dream.
Right.
So so that the pressure from him plus the dream, and then I had come across a technique called goal mapping many years earlier, which I really liked because it was very visual and very whole brain. And so the actual sort of the pivotal moment for me was convincing my friends that we should go through and use this goal mapping technique to come up with a plan to achieve our dreams.
Okay.
And so we did exactly that.
So, we'll come back to that goal mapping and that
Sure.
visual thing in a little bit, because that is also, pivotal, I guess, for you.
Yes.
So what did you have to let go of, in order to create that change and
Mhm.
move towards a dream? There were things that you would also have to let go of. What
Yes.
sort of things that you had to really find a way of letting go of?
I think security in a way. I was very um, oh, I have a need for security. And so to be coming out of that familiar known space and doing something drastically different meant really sort of changing my worldview and changing my because my view of the world at the time was that it was totally impractical, that we didn't have the finances, so I had a whole load of limiting beliefs that needed to shift for that to become a reality.
And so, in what sort of internal strength did you need in order to shift that mindset that was going on about safety and security?
I think I had to have a compelling reason why. So, it was really important that because unless I built up that, I had to tip the balance from it's much safer to stay here
Right.
to oh no, I'm definitely going to go. And
Yeah.
so that to get that motivation was needed a big shift.
And if you were to sort of think about the biggest shift that you
Mhm.
had to make, and maybe, that's part of your goal mapping. I don't know whether or not it was, but do you think was the biggest shift that you had to make?
I think oh, it's very difficult. You're asking some great questions. I think for me, it was probably around my identity.
Ah, okay. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yes, because the I had in that corporate world, I was really forcing myself to fit into the role, the environment that wasn't 100% comfortable fit, but was so almost like it was like I was making compromises, I would say. And what I had, the shift was that I had to decide that it was more important for me to move and have quality of life and provide that for my family than it was to stay, which was still, both of them had wins for my family, but I had a battle going on around, should I stay here in this secure and safe place, or do I, really step out and vote for me in a way and vote for that future that I desire, but it's not a reality right now.
And so that takes a lot, because your whole identity up to that point
Mhm.
was tied up in your corporate world, and I'm
Yes,
assuming, having a living coming in and knowing that you had a salary. So
yes.
what was the moment that you kind of knew? Well, no, let me ask you a different question. What happened, do you think, to enable you to make that shift?
Mhm. I think that if I come back to that map for a minute, that was the point when I dared to dream that it could happen.
Right.
And I still at that point was very, I don't know, skeptical. It was a wish more than a dream. But the more that I allowed it to percolate in my mind and the more I talked about it to others, the more it became. a possibility. And because I was then talking about it and and just looking on line to see whether there were houses that could be, the right fit for me, and then it started to become much more of a reality. And it's interesting, Christina, because I would say that there's two phases to my dream. The first phase was, okay, a new location, and the second phase was the new career. So, so
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. That change from corporate life to the new career.
Mm,
And I've known you a long time. I've always known you to be a very creative person. I think when I first met you, you used to make these little Fimo models and
yes,
as gifts, and you've been on workshops. I know you did the soulscaping workshop. You've been
yes,
some of Lindsay and my workshops and things like that.
yes,
So
yeah.
what part would you say that creativity had within your journey of I don't know if you call it a journey, within your journey of transition?
Yeah, I would say a massive part because the when I'm being creative, I really feel I can be me. I sort of have to get my judging head out of the way.
Right.
But there's something about, I can just get into a flow state when I'm being creative, and I just love it. So, and that's why I've really thirsted to do anything creative. It's why I really enjoyed the workshops that you run, because you just allow me to combine my love of learning and coaching with creativity, which for me is like that, that magical mix of all those three things together.
And one of the things that we say about creativity is that it enables you to go into an unconscious part of you and kind of release something that you
Yeah.
were unaware was there. Have you got an example, or can you think of a time when something that you were doing creative helped you to, release something that it was authentic for you?
Yes, I can think of a number of times that that's happened, because it does definitely unlock something in me, just enabling me to really sort of get out stuff that's in my head. And so you ran a great workshop where we had masks, and we were doing one mask which was, let's have a look at the view that we give the outside world, and then I had a very beautifully neat mask. And then it was what's going on the inside, and then on the inside was like this whole mass of, color and emotion, and again, it just feels very well. It's I get in touch with my soul when I do things like that. It was just really very powerful. So yeah. And
So
I just get it. So just the soulscaping as well. You talked about that earlier, and I can remember my first soulscaping exercise, and I had a piece of paper that was probably as big as a table, and I just literally was, there was paint all over this piece of paper, and it was just so liberating to be able to do that. And I had a crazy day that day, and it didn't matter, that craziness was going on. I was just able to just be in that flow state.
and that sort of feels very expansive when you're just out
Yes.
there doing stuff. And if we come back to that goal mapping where
Mm,
it was creative, and I know a little bit about it,
yes.
explain to me how that then helped you to solidify what you wanted to do.
Yes, so if you look at my goal map from back then, it's a big piece of paper, and it just allowed me to get out on that paper everything that was really important to me, very visually. So, lots of color, big pictures, and just allow it to be. And I think it's just so liberating to not have all of this confined in your head, but to be able to just express it creatively.
So basically, and the goal mapping is a kind of a process
It is a process, yes. Yeah.
that
But
enabled
yeah.
you to do that. Um, and again, with that, was there a point during the time when you were creating that goal map that you just kind of knew this is something you've got to do?
Yes, I think when you go through the process of creating a goal map, you start with a relaxation exercise. So that makes you feel lovely and relaxed. And then a visualization. So that's when you allow yourself to do that dreaming, and you look at what could be possible in the future.
Right.
And I think and then once you've got here's what I would love to have in the future, the next phase is to look at why. Why is this really important to you? And I think that's the point, having that really compelling reason why just convinced me I had to make it happen. So, and I don't think even once I got my map, it still was a bit of a dream for me. But then as I started to talk to other people about it, you know, convinced my husband and talk to my mother about it and other people that I get and talk to you about it as well, people that I really care about, it
Mhm.
just started to crystallize and become not just a I'd like to, but actually I'm going to make it happen. But that was over. I wouldn't say that it was a switch overnight. I think the switch was that I had something physical that I could show people and myself that was a plan to sort of get there.
Ah, right. So the physical representation that you made in your goal mapping was kind of the seed that's
Yes.
already then planted, I guess.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I know you, and so it all seemed to happen so quickly. It seemed that you were talking about it one day, and it felt like the next day, well, you're off. You know what I mean? So it did seem once you got that creative map in front of you,
Yes.
it sort of happened quite easily. There wasn't months and months of searching for a house, or well, maybe there was, but
No.
it seemed,
No, there wasn't.
it just that sort of visual representation seemed to enable it to happen quickly, more quickly.
Yes. Yes. And I think because, as soon as I'd articulated what I would like it to be, and then started to look, I think because it's amazing how your subconscious, once you once you planted a seed, your
Yeah,
subconscious starts to move in that direction, doesn't it?
yeah,
And so I started to look online and I started to see houses which would be a perfect fit.
right.
And almost down to the level of, I put on my goal map that I would love a hot tub, and sure enough, I found a house with a hot tub. It just really uncanny level of accuracy with what I put on my map. So yeah, it was very, very quick. But partly I think that was because I didn't allow myself initially to believe that it could happen because it was totally unrealistic in terms of timescales
Yeah.
on my map. But actually, it was exactly what happened. So
So
it
I mean,
wasn't so unrealistic after all.
yeah, and so that is, sort of really that whole thing about, when you set yourself, it's almost like Attila, when you set yourself
Yeah,
that goal, I'm going to cross the Atlantic or whatever it is in my boat, then once you start, it's almost like it takes on a life of its own.
absolutely. Yes.
And sort of, what is it about this particular dream, do you think, that took on a life of its own, whereas other dreams you may have had didn't take on a life of their own, and maybe they sort of fell by the wayside, or that? What do you think it was that made this one so compelling?
I definitely think that having a compelling reason why for
Yeah,
me is really important. And I did have, really compelling reasons why I wanted this to happen. And I do definitely think that having just that visual representation for me personally made a massive difference. So because I had, I just it was very compelling. And so I have used that technique since to achieve other things in my life. So, because I know how compelling that is for me personally. I'm not saying it would work for everyone, but for me, having that visual representation and a compelling reason why just helps me to get momentum and get focused. And I'm not a person who's hugely into planning normally. So I do need something that's going to pull for me to make it happen.
yeah, yeah. So we've sort of been chatting now for about 20 minutes or so. Is there anything else that you would like to say about that whole sense of that transition and creativity that as you've been thinking about it and as you've been talking about it, that is sort of an important part of the jigsaw puzzle?
I think that even talking to you now is reminding me of how important creativity is for me personally, and how liberating it is to be able to not just be like it's stuck in your left brain the whole time. I think when you're in an organizational type role, it's easy to get into that. It's all about the logic and the planning and the data, and we have both sides of our brain and we don't stretch enough the right side or tap in enough to it. So again, for me personally, that's really important, and you're just reinforcing for me the need to go and do more of it.
And sort of now that you're sort of settled in this new life, what is it that you're wanting to do within this new life that is the new you and part of, because I know you haven't gone back to corporate life.
No.
What is it that you're wanting to offer people that is, sort of part of the going forward for you?
For me, I think it's about freedom and the freedom to be yourself and to be everything that you can be. So I really want to help others that have, maybe a dream, that are feeling frustrated with where they are today, or maybe life's thrown a massive curveball at them, and they just don't know which way is up. And so my passion is around helping them to really get back in touch with who they are and what's really important to them, and to help them to move forward.
And I know that with goal setting, it is a creative process.
It is, yeah.
So it combines you know, the getting the big why and the creativity.
Yes.
And if anybody wants, were you about to say something?
Yeah, sorry, Christine. I was going to say that I think it starts though with understanding who you are.
Yeah.
And I think when life throws massive changes at us, like the pandemic, or like, losing a job, or, suddenly finding out that you've got a life-changing illness,
Yeah.
life throws things at you, and sometimes you do lose that sense of identity. And so for me, it's around starting with who are you, and really getting back to and helping people to discover that for themselves, at their core, who are they and what's important to them, so that they can, because without that, you can't really do the planning. I know there's been times in my life when I've not been able to see clearly at all, because I've just lost that sense of identity.
It is that whole thing about identity. Who am I? Why am I here? What's the important about?
Yes.
And if somebody wants to get in contact with you, if they
Mhm.
listen to this um, on YouTube and want to get in contact with you, how would they do that?
Right, so my website is chyra.co.uk, and that's chyra, chyra.co.uk. And then all of my contact details are on there. So, and I'd love to yeah, talk to them.
So I really want to say thank you today, Christine, for talking to me, and I really appreciate the time that you've given to me today. And I really wish you well in your adventure going forward, and do keep in touch with us.
Definitely do that. Thank you, Christina. It's been a real pleasure.
You're most welcome.